Hi and welcome to One Patriots Place Live, brought to you by e2gsports.com. And if you are listening on podcast, thank you for downloading. Please do not forget to rate, review and subscribe. Your hosts today, the mild-mannered man who's always in the middle and could possibly kill you with a teaspoon. It is the darling Steve Balistreri and me, Claire Cooper. Welcome to the show of two. Steve, how's things with you?
Hanging in there. Unfortunately, our third cog in the wheel there, Mr. Murphy, can't be with us today. He had something that came up, so he had to take care of, and we miss Murph, and we hope he'll be back shortly. But, just instead of the three amigos, it's the two amigos today. So we'll talk a little bit about the roster. We'll talk about the offense this week and give our thoughts on there. And so how are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Everything's going well.
Good.
We're kind of in that dead spot for football between mini camp and training camp. So there won't be a lot of news coming out for any of the NFL teams or the Patriots unless they sign somebody. But that's about it. I mean, so, we have to weather the storm for about 3 or 4 more weeks, and then training camp will start, and then we'll be nonstop football until February.
This is it. This is about as close to off season as we really get, these couple of weeks. Because there's no off season as far as I'm concerned. There's still always podcasts to be put out and things to be written. But yeah, like you mentioned, these few 3 weeks, there's not really much to be done. So it's just a case of kind of waiting for minicamp. So we're all kind of in that little Patriots slump now. So yeah.
Right. And this is the time of the year where the players take their vacation, before the season starts. And so they get away, and there won't be as many guys at the facility during this time. So they just have to, for those of us who do podcasts and whatnot, we have to fill the time. So
this is it. We have to come up with things to think about. And because we're Murphless today, we decided that we'd do a bit of offense, wouldn't we? We're Murphless. We're Murphless, as Chris said. A Murphless 1 PP we've had from Chris. So yeah, we are Murphless today, I'm afraid.
That's right.
So,
so hopefully everything's going smooth. I guess we can let it out. He's having a bunch of work done at his house. And so they're going to be interfering with his internet and his office space over there. So he can't be with us. But
we had schedule issues.
We'll drive on, and we'll talk a little bit about the offensive roster this week, because I think it's interesting that I thought the Patriots offense was pretty good last year. There was obviously some holes. There was some things that needed to be a lot better. Mm-hmm. But, overall, I didn't think it was bad, especially with all the new pieces they had, the rookie quarterback. And I really like the additions they made this year, during the offseason. What were your thoughts on that?
To be honest with you, when I look at the offense as a whole, the only thing that I'm sort of mildly concerned, maybe more than mildly, is the offensive line. I know that there's still the sort of cries of wide receiver 1, but they've got so much depth at wide receiver at this stage that there's so much that needs to play out there and see who's going to kind of continue. It feels like they've got plenty of depth at running back, tight end. The depth is a bit give or take because it really depends on what Keenan Asiasi can do this year. But even though I'm a bit of a tight end enthusiast, I don't really have the concerns at this stage. I'm interested to see how it unfolds, but there isn't much of a concern. It's the offensive line that sort of makes me a bit worried. Of last season, they started and they did a lot of switching. As soon as the season started, there was a lot of ins and outs, and then Trent Brown didn't last very long injury-wise and stuff like that. And I just really hope that we don't end up having to go through that again, because they're not quite sure who's going to be what. I'm really hoping that when we get to training camp, it's a significant time for them to see of the O-line who can be kind of what sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think I'm not concerned with the quality. It's the quantity.
No.
Because
Yeah.
they've had both tackles have had injury concerns.
Yes.
So I think it's imperative this year for those two guys to stay healthy. Although the Patriots are very, very high on their swing tackle, Justin Herron. We talked with Mike Diabate about
Yeah,
that,
and
and
I don't know if I see that. I don't know. Maybe it's just me being, because obviously, what do I know? But I don't know. I never saw it really be, they're putting Justin Herron, and I'm like, okay. It doesn't really fill me with the most exuberant confidence, but that might just be sort of my bias as such.
right. Well, and we'll get into the offensive line, but let's start right at the top.
Okay.
At quarterback, because I know some people think they're only going to keep two. Right now, as the roster stands, they have Mac Jones, who's not going anywhere, Brian Hoyer, and the rookie Bailey Zappi. I think, honestly, they're going to keep all three this year.
Yeah, completely.
But I've seen a lot of people think they're only going to keep two and maybe bring back Brian Hoyer at bring him back as kind of a addition after the cut down. I just think they're going to keep all three. Hoyer, to me, is they guaranteed him a salary of $3 million, which tells me he's not going anywhere. I think
he's he seems too valuable, and I look at it from the perspective of, I'm not saying he's a quarterback coach. I know he's not. He's a quarterback, but he's got so many years under his belt in the Patriot system. He's so much experience there that he's too valuable for the Patriots offense as a whole, I reckon, for them to risk not having him. And sort of Bailey Zappi's that Mac mold, as we keep saying, and you need that backup. So it really seems to be like, surely 3 is kind of just enough.
right. And the main thing I think we'll see in training camp is if Zappi is ready to take over as the backup, because we know Hoyer is a great mentor to have. He's been in the league a long time. He's a great sounding board for Mac Jones. Jones said so much, last year. But it'll be interesting to see, because Zappi has a lot of talent, and granted, he played against lesser competition. But when guys play against small schools, you want to see them do what? You want to see them dominate. Well, I think throwing 62 touchdowns and setting the record for the most yards ever in a college football season, as well as for touchdowns, I think that shows dominance. And, like you just mentioned, I think Zappi is one of those guys that he's not exactly the same as Mac Jones, but they're cut from the same cloth. And I think he's a great fit for what they want out of this offense.
Yeah, I agree. I genuinely would be seriously shocked if they cut it down to 2. That would be like, what is the point of anything? Like you said, they've give Hoyer the contract and he seems way too valuable. They've drafted Zappi and he's got this potential of this Mac mold, or this, similar, he's got the similar vibe when it comes to quarterback. So it would seem pointless to waste any of that by getting rid, sort of thing. If anything, I'd be way more surprised. I would be way less surprised if they went through with 4 than 2, in all fairness.
And Chris brings up another really good point, because we talked about Brian Hoyer being a mentor for Mac Jones, and Zappi could benefit from that as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And by the way, Zappi spells his name with the E, not a Y. But but I get where Chris is coming from with that. It'll be interesting to see, because this will be his first training camp. He's trying to learn the offense. There's a lot of moving parts. I'm sure he's going to struggle at times. All rookies do. and it all depends on how quickly he can learn the playbook. And I think he's the backup quarterback of the future. It might not
Yeah,
be this year.
completely.
He might be, the third guy this year, I should say, and inactive on game days. But I see him as being the the backup of the future.
Yeah, completely.
So
Yeah,
Claire,
I don't see two.
let's move on. As you said, running back, which is they have a lot of depth here at running back.
Mm.
So
yeah, I was surprised that they took two in the draft, didn't they? Am I
yes, they
remembering correctly?
did.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, it was the first one. Fine. Yeah, I was surprised that they took because I think it was a position. The trouble was going into this draft, everything felt so focused as a Patriots fan on cornerbacks and linebackers. That it felt like there was such need there that other things for me sort of fell to the wayside. So running backs, I was surprised. I see what they've drafted is it's sort of very much reflective of how they want to build for the future. And I know how Bill likes to use running backs and how he likes to bench them when they've done something wrong. So you need plenty of depth if you're going to kind of put one in the doghouse for doing a drop, that sort of thing. But it's I know that it's a case of sort of maybe even a contract thing as well with Damien Harris. He's up for his contract, so that they're trying to draft to replace rather than pay. I know there's a lot of talk about that, really. So yeah,
and I think I loved the drafting of Pierre Strong. I mean, you're talking about a guy with incredible speed, and he had 11 touchdowns, 50 yards or more in his college career. Excuse me. That's something the Patriots traditionally haven't really had. They haven't had that breakaway kind of speed guy at the running back position. Now, as you mentioned, a lot of their running backs go through that quote unquote red shirt year where they sit them on the bench for a year. And a lot of that has to do with pass blocking, pass protection.
yeah,
Because that's something that they insist that their running backs, if they're going to be active on game day, have to be good at. From what we heard from his college coaches, Pierre Strong is already a very, very good pass protector, which, and we're going to get into this in a second. I think James White starts training camp on PUP, probably even the season on PUP. So that could open the door for a guy like Strong to see some reps, maybe not a ton, but some, on third downs early this year, because I think they would love to be able to take advantage of his speed.
Yeah, definitely what they've added this season. Chris chimes in as well in the running back situation. On running backs, do you think training camp might see the end of JJ Taylor? That's interesting. That is interesting. What do you think, Steve?
Yes, I do. I mean, I think it's a real possibility because, as you said, Damien Harris is entering the final season of his contract. The Patriots have shown traditionally that, they're not going to pay running backs big money. So I think, with Ramondre Stevenson already on the roster, and we kind of looked at them at the end of last season as kind of a 1A and 1B type of thing.
Yeah.
And the other guy they drafted, Kevin Harris, I think he's a diamond in the rough. He played at South Carolina, so he played in the SEC, which, as we all know, is probably the best division in college football. He led the SEC a couple of years ago in rushing. Then he had a back injury. He had back surgery. It took him about half the season to get on track. And then he finished off last season, I think, pretty well. If you've ever seen this guy, he has thighs the size of tree trunks. And he's a power runner.
Yeah.
So I think they drafted him with the, probably knowledge that this will be it for Damian Harris this season. And depending on how Harris works out, I'm talking about Kevin Harris. We have so many Harrises and Joneses on the team now. It's like
guys just need to be numbers now. We just need to, although they haven't officially got them all yet. So yeah,
you have to qualify every single name now. But depending on how he looks, I think it's even possible. If he looks strong and Stevenson looks strong, maybe they feel like they could get some really nice, draft capital for a guy like Damian Harris. Although I tend to doubt it. I think that they like Harris and they're going to let him run his course this season. But I mean, is it out of the realm of possibility? Not at all. I mean, we've seen this in the past with the Patriots, especially, they have a pretty deep roster of running backs. And getting back to, Chris's question, I mean, you're looking at J.J. Taylor. I know he had a nice mini camp. Mike Diabate talked about that a little bit. But, he hasn't shown the ability to crack that game day roster and do much yet. And I think with a guy like Pierre Strong coming in, who's a little bit a little bit bigger, and he's got that speed for days. So I think, unless Taylor has a really, really solid training camp this year, I think he might be on the outs, depending on how things work out, unless there's an injury or whatnot. But because Strong isn't going anywhere. Harris, Kevin Harris. Kevin Harris, he could end up being cut, or, he can make the roster. I think the competition there will be very, very strong.
I don't think any of them really, I don't know, because I would have to refer to Miguel, or people would have to refer to Miguel, but I don't think releasing any of the running backs really gives anything significant when it comes to cap space.
No,
like sort of like the Isaiah wins and things like this. I don't think there's anything significant there.
Right.
Done,
and
really.
I think no one's, with the exception of maybe J.J. Taylor, I don't think any of the other running backs would get cut. I think it might, if anything, it might be a trade type thing, a trade scenario.
Yeah. But it feels late in the season to really bother about trade, unless there's a player that they know that they can get with a significant trade. I think really there's sort of nothing really left because of the draft being over, I suppose. But then again, it's always looking for the future, I guess. But do you really want to trade him for future draft picks?
It'll depend. Again, it'll depend on how the summer goes. I mean, if these young kids show that they're more than capable of stepping in, and again, I think if Pierre Strong is able to make an impact in the kicking game, I think that guarantees him a spot on the game day roster.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin Harris isn't much of a special team contributor, so that would be against him. But but again, I mean, we've seen the Patriots do stuff in the past, and maybe a trade. And I'm not saying they're going to. I think it's slim, but again, the possibility is there. Maybe a player for player, maybe not so much a draft pick, but if a team is in dire need of a running back, and they really like Damian Harris, which there's a lot to like there. Maybe if the Patriots see a trade for a player for player, I mean, I think that's a possibility. And Chris put in there again, Bill does love a trade, never rule anything out. Absolutely, Chris. You know that. I mean, Bill is always a wheeler dealer, and they've always traditionally made, trades at the end of training camp. They made one last year with Sean Wade, and we'll get to him when we do the defense. But I mean, they've done this stuff in the past, so I wouldn't rule it out.
No, this is fair. Really nothing else. But then again, it's like you mentioned Wade. It's like we haven't seen him. We didn't see him the year that he got traded in. I know we'll touch upon that in defense, but it's just a case of such sight unseen at the moment with several players.
Yeah, and we'll see, because when we get to the defense, there's so many players.
This is it.
This is going to be a big year for a lot of their players that they've invested in.
And we can't do a defense without Murph, because then he misses the opportunity to like go nuts over Jack Jones and have his moment. And so we don't want him to miss out, because he'll be heck to live with if we made him miss out that.
I know.
That's why we did the offense, so he got to miss out my tight end issue. I can get that out of the way without him.
His ears are ringing because you just said Jack Jones, just like in the past when anyone mentioned Brandon Bolden, that was.
He's worse this year, though. He seems worse this year with Jack Jones. He seems worse at the moment. Whether or not it's like the novelty will wear off, but he seems really intense with the whole Jack Jones love at the moment. But I think it's just because he's new. Hopefully it'll calm down and hopefully it'll
we know Murph. That won't calm down. But hey, let's move on to the wide receivers.
Yeah. Oh, yes, let's.
Again, I mean, there's so much talk. And, people keep repeating this time and time again. Oh, the Patriots don't have a true number one wide receiver. And that's very true. But they won 6 Super Bowls without a true number one wide receiver.
Yes, there is this.
I mean, you go back to the first 3, who was their number one guy? Was it Troy Brown? Was it David Patton? Maybe David Givens? I mean, those were the guys who were, making the big plays. And later on, I mean, Julian Edelman, Chris Hogan, Brandon LaFell in that one season. I mean, they've never really traditionally had that, Randy Moss type. Now, when he was here, he lit it up, but they didn't win the Super Bowl.
Do you think it's just because wide receiver one seems to demand a high price tag? Particularly this season, or this season that we've just this off season, the price tag for a wide receiver is just inflation is ridiculous around here. But do you think it's just because Bill just doesn't like to pay? Do you think it's really as simple as that? Bill doesn't want to pay for a WR1, so that's it.
No, I think that hits the nail on the head, because he doesn't see the value in paying a guy like that. And when you look at these teams with the diva wide receivers, most of them don't win the Super Bowl. I mean, the Patriots had Moss that one year, but I go back to Kerry Byrne, who was the owner of Cold Hard Football Facts. I don't know, it's probably before your time, but Kerry Byrne always talked about number one wide receivers being a shiny hood ornament. They look nice. They're great when you're driving down the road, but
they do nothing.
But it really doesn't really matter about the worth of your car with that shiny hood ornament. And I go back to that, and I'm a firm believer in that. Patriots a prime example. They went to 9 Super Bowls and won 6 of them without that shiny hood ornament. So
you know what the argument would be, though? The argument would be, yes, but with Tom Brady. That's probably what Derek would say. I'm guessing.
Derek has said that.
Oh, wow. Aren't I good? Yes.
And I'm going to be talking with him and Russ
cool.
on Wednesday, and I'm sure that we'll get into that. But yeah, I mean, but back to the wide receivers that they have here, I think their roster right now for wide receivers is very, very deep.
Oh, if it's nothing else, it's jam-packed.
Yes, and I think they have guys that are, I'm not going to say supremely talented, but they have guys that are talented enough to make a big, big difference. I think, Kendrick Bourne, Nelson Aguilar, I think those guys are entering their second season in the system. And you got to remember, last year they entered the system. This was their first year. The Patriots route tree for their wide receivers is incredibly difficult to learn. We've seen that in the past. And they were doing it at first with Cam Newton as quarterback, and then, later on Mac Jones. And I think this year will be a big barometer to see how those guys react. And they brought back Jacoby Myers, and they added Devontae Parker, who, if Parker stays healthy, he's kind of on the cusp of that number one kind of guy.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So, I think those guys, you can pencil them all into the roster unless somebody gets hurt. I've heard rumors that, Aguilar could possibly be a trade target. Again, a lot of people were complaining about Aguilar's contract. And as you just said, this year kind of blew all that right out of the water, because now he's a bargain,
Yeah. Built underpaid.
Yeah, with the wide receivers that are getting paid this year, Aguilar's now, he went from like, the Patriots overpaid for him. He's a bargain this year now. So,
and if he performs a lot better than he did last year, if they're able to utilize him a lot better, he will be a steal. Then it'll be that next.
Yeah, and I think with Aguilar, the chemistry wasn't there with him and Mac Jones last year. Because they got him, to be, more of that field stretcher type of guy. And they attempted that quite a few times, but they couldn't really get on the same sheet of music. But, one of the things we saw in minicamp was, and again, it's minicamp, there's no contact or whatever, but it seemed like the deep ball, was a much better option for them so far this summer.
And now you've got all this speed, not just like Aguilar. You've got all this speed, particularly if they do use the rookie, if they do use Thornton, it'll just it makes it so much different. What the options that they've got are so wider now that they've added these guys. Even if you haven't got your wide receiver one that everybody likes, you've got so many more options. I think it's going to be very exciting to unfold.
Yeah, I think, I look at the top five: Parker, Aguilar, Myers, Bourne, and Tyquan Thornton, who we haven't even mentioned yet. They drafted him. Now, one of the knocks on the Patriots wide receivers has been they haven't had that speed guy. Well, they got some speed now with this kid.
Yeah.
I mean, he absolutely flies. So, that will open things up, I think, when he's on the field this year. So I think you can pencil them five guys in, barring a trade, if they trade Aguilar. I think those guys are in. The question now is, will they keep six? There was a lot of talk about that. And I think they're going to try to trade N'Keal Harry. Mike mentioned when he was on our show last week, Harry looked very uncomfortable at minicamp. I think, he knows he's not in the plans for this year, but he showed up because you're supposed to show up for mandatory minicamp.
Yeah.
And, the Patriots know he's not in their plan, so they really didn't use him very much. I think the best thing they could do is try to find a trade partner for him. And again, not so much for, as Chris would put, a custard donut, I think he put.
Chris has put that to trade N'Keal Harry for a packet of custard creams. Now, to translate from English into American, a custard cream is like a biscuit, which translated into American is like a cookie. So it's a cookie kind of thing. Okay. So he's basically saying trade N'Keal Harry for a packet of cookies, basically, which is great because I love cookies. And Chris did this to me the other week when he said about trade N'Keal Harry for a ham sandwich. which again just made me hungry because it's the afternoon here. So, Chris, can you please stop with the cookies and the sandwiches because you're making me hungry and I've still got half a show to do. So, yeah, can we just go on with the food, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, they'll get nothing for him in draft capital, but if they can find someone that needs a wide receiver, that has a player that they might be interested in seeing as a reclamation project, somebody that needs a fresh start like Harry does, I think that's a possibility. I saw, I think I mentioned it on a show a week or two ago that, somebody in Dallas was mentioning one of their defensive linemen who's been an underachiever, was drafted only a couple spots after Harry, and somebody from Dallas was saying, that the Cowboys need a physical wide receiver. Why don't they trade up with the Patriots straight up for these two guys? I think that's a possibility. I mean, not so much this guy, but, I think that's probably more apt to happen than not. But that leaves us with, and they still have quite a few players: Trey Nixon, Ty Montgomery, Malcolm Perry, Christian Wilkerson, and little Jordan Humphrey, who's not very little. He's a great big guy.
Yeah. They went and signed someone else. It's like you can't see them signing that guy and then N'Keal Harry still being around. It just doesn't feel. I mean, I know they can easily release this kid and everything, but it just kind of, every time you look at the list of wide receivers, it's just sort of another nail in the coffin, shall we say, for N'Keal Harry in Gillette, it feels like, anyway.
Yeah, and, going forward, I think Trey Nixon had a great mini camp, and I think that's super for him. Now the big question will be, can he do it when the pads come on and there's contact? And, if he can continue his hot summer, maybe, that will open up, because he's pretty good size. I think he's 6'2", and he's fast. He's got speed.
Oh, good.
So I'd have to look it up. I think he's 6'2", about 190.
Trey Nixon is 6'2", 180 on here on the positional roster. That's what it says on the positional roster.
Yeah. I thought he was like 190, but okay, he's kind of in the Thornton category there. He's kind of thin, but could we see that happen? Sure, I think so. I mean, if he shows he's able to, continue that, he has a really good preseason game to start off the year. Maybe, they can save some cap space, trade Aguilar. I think Kendrick Bourne is the guy that I'm really excited to see this year. I think he's going to be used a lot more. I think he's going to be primarily in the slot this year. But again, I'm not closing the door on Devontae Parker. I mean, I've seen what he can do against the Patriots in the past when he's healthy. And I think a lot of people are kind of writing him off, and I wouldn't be in such a hurry to do that.
Who are all these people that you're talking to, Steve? Because they all sound crazy. They're writing off Devontae Parker. They're going to only take 2 quarterbacks. Who are these people that you are talking to? Because
I talk to so many people, but the bottom line is, I mean, there's always that element of negativity with the Patriots. We deal with that. We've been dealing with that for over 20 years.
No, you don't say.
It's funny you mention that, because one of the guys that listens to our other show that I do, Patriots 4th and 2 with Ruts and Derek, he's from Europe as well. He was from Germany. And a couple of years ago, he came to the United States with his wife. He got tickets for a game against Miami, and he was very excited. He was coming to his first NFL game. He was going to see the Patriots, and so he came. They did the hall at Patriot Place the day before the game, They watched the game. Patriots won big. I want to say it was like 38-17 or 38-14. I mean, they blew the Dolphins out. And then he was here in Boston, or there in Boston, I should say, for the, not only for the game, but the next day. I think they left like 2 days after the game. And he was listening to sports radio the morning after the game.
Big mistake.
And he DM'd me on Twitter, and he was like, all that stuff that you and Russ and Derek always talk about, the negativity around the team. And he was like, I questioned what I saw. Because he said, because I was listening to sports radio. And he goes, and you would think the Patriots lost 38-14 after the game that week. And I was like, that's why we say the things that we do. And Chris's next question, and we can pop it up on the screen. How many wide receivers do I believe that they'll keep? I think there's a very good opportunity for them to keep 6. Now, I just did a 53-man roster projection, so I'm going to, shoot my own argument down. I put down they're only keeping 5, but I think that there's a very real possibility that they do keep 6. If they decide to keep Aguilar and Trey Nixon or Montgomery or, Wilkerson, Perry, Humphrey, one of those guys really steps up in the offseason, I think there's a real opportunity that they would keep 6 and then, cut one from somewhere else. And, with the running backs, I think, they're probably only going to keep 4 initially. I think James White will start on PUP. So, but anyway.
When you're talking wide receivers, did you miss out Matthew Slater, though? I know obviously he's like a special teams guy, but he comes under the wide receiver number. So
yeah, I just listed him, and we'll get to that at the end. I listed him as a special teams guy.
Got you. Okay. So you don't put him under the wide receiver number, you put him under the special teams number.
I think he's a wide receiver in name only. I mean, if you ever make it down to training camp, you'll see Matthew Slater, whatever's going on, because they have the 2 practice fields right beside each other. Whatever's going on the one practice field, Matthew Slater's on the other one all by himself, doing special teams drills, sprinting.
Got you.
The entire practice. If you've ever get down to training camp, and I'm sure some of our listeners have been there, it's amazing to watch the work that he puts in and the fact that he's still in such peak physical condition that he can do that, because it's amazing to watch. But yeah, I don't really consider him. I know that on the roster it's wide receiver, but
yeah,
he's really not a wide receiver.
Yeah, I was just going by my positional, because I've got a positional roster in front of me. So I was just kind of more going on the positional when you were looking at numbers, because I wouldn't want him to kind of not make it through, basically.
Yeah, because I'm, we'll jump ahead a little bit. I have, I got my roster. I have, like, under special teams, I have 7 guys listed there.
Okay.
And
I haven't looked at the roster yet, so
yeah, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I got Slater, Cody Davis, Justin Bethel. Those guys are core special teams guys first and foremost, and then you have your 3, Joe Cardona, your long snapper, Jake Bailey, the punter, Nick Folk, and I actually entered another guy who we'll get to when we do special teams. But
we don't want a spoiler alert and get ahead.
Yes, it's spoiler alert. So yeah, and now we're going to move on, Claire. Tight endage. We're going to talk some tight endage now.
How many have you got? How many would you take then? How many are you taking?
You won't like my answer.
Yeah, 2. Yeah.
Yes.
You're taking 2, aren't you? No. Boo! Bad Steve. Spray with the water gun. Bad Steve. Bad Steve.
Yeah, I think and again, this is initial. But I do think that they're only going to keep Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. initially. Now, that's not to say that they won't bring back like Asiasi or Keane to the practice squad, and then bring them up on the roster on game days or whatnot. Or, if at the end of training camp, who knows if there's another player from another team that gets cut that they might not want to, add to their tight end
Yes, there is.
roster. But, right now, I think it's pretty safe to say that Asiasi and Keane have been non-factors.
Mm.
And neither one of those, I mean, they drafted both of those guys. They used some, significant draft capital on those guys. So, I think this is a big training camp for both of them.
I think more so for Asiasi performance and more so for Keane health, because I think his biggest downfall is just he hasn't been healthy enough to show anything. Whereas Asiasi, it feels like he just hasn't shown anything because he was a healthy scratch for a whole season. See, to me, this is the thing that I'll keep going back to, and I know repeating myself. If he was a healthy scratch for a whole season, how is it that we're suddenly going to see something from him this training camp to change, to change the minds, to make him be, utilized and stuff like this? I don't know. I feel like it's just a case of they're waiting for the right opportunity to utilize him as capital and to trade him, but I could be completely wrong there.
Well, I think because they kept a fullback in years past, that might open the door where if they keep him around on the roster, he could be a healthy game day addition this year, because we know that they're.
Sorry, go on. It just seems like why they didn't do that last year, because you had Hunter and you had Smith with some injury niggles. Asiasi had been in the system longer than both of them. Why not use him even a little bit? That's the thing that just keeps being hinky to me, is the fact that they used him zero, zilch, nada.
Yeah, I think it has to do with practice. I mean, Bill is big. If you don't produce in practice, you're not going to see the field. And, if he's not producing in practice, then, he's not going to get that game day, addition. So
no,
that's why
Chris's
I think,
comment.
Yeah, I think this is a big training camp for both of those guys.
Yeah.
Is a watch.
Yeah, this is what I'm championing. TEs, keep 2, cut 2, and place on
Actually
Izzo watch.
Cut 3, because Matt Sokol is the third.
He can go on the practice squad. He's fine. He can go on the practice squad. That's fine.
Yeah, but you'd still have to cut him from the
roster. Of course, yeah. Sorry. Okay, he can be cut and come back.
Yeah, because I do think that one of those 3 guys might end up on the practice squad. But I think I thought Hunter Henry had a pretty good season. I thought as the year went on, he became Max red zone guy. I think he'll be even better this year.
Yeah.
And I think Jonnu Smith is primed for a much, much better season this year.
He's under a bit of pressure. He kind of, maybe it's just from like the fans in general, but he needs to show something this season to show. It feels like he needs to prove his worth a little bit, just because everybody's expectations of him, other than myself, because I was a Hunter Henry gal from the beginning. But I think the expectations from a lot of the fans for Jonnu was high. They expected him to be this big weapon guy, and he sort of
because
and he had that tragic game against the Saints.
I'm totally in agreement with you there, because when they when they signed him, I was one of those people. I was like, oh, Josh McDaniel's going to find so many ways to use Jonnu Smith. He's going to be kind of like the gadget guy and the Swiss Army knife, and they didn't do any of those things. So, I mean, it just goes to show you sometimes we can all be wrong.
I think it was unfortunate for him that he came in with expectations so high. If he'd have come in just under sort of mild expectation, he'll be utilised a bit. I don't think it'd have felt so severe as it did when he just sort of seemed to, I say underperform, it's just one of a better phrase, but yeah, underperform from what was anticipated. I think he fell in the trap of a little bit of what Aguilar was. It was like, oh, you paid him all this money. He hasn't really done a lot. He hasn't put the numbers up. So, yeah.
No, he didn't. But, a lot of that I blame on the coaching staff because they didn't utilize him at all. I mean, if you're not putting him on the fields in certain situations or, you're only asking him to do one thing, it doesn't really give him the opportunity to shine. And, that's one of the things the Patriots have traditionally done is they've put their players in the best position to succeed. That's one of the things about Bill Belichick. And I thought last year they didn't really do that with Jonnu Smith. I thought to an extent, Aguilar and Jones, they just couldn't click, but it wasn't for lack of trying, which I think that might change this year. But I think with Smith, they really didn't give him that opportunity. So I know that moving forward with Henry and Smith, I think they'll get a lot more creative this year. I think they saw what they had, but they didn't utilize it. And I think they're going to try to rectify that this year.
That's one of the things that I'm really excited for when the season finally kicks off in September and we finally get some proper tight endage. Very exciting. Exciting.
Proper tight
endage. Yeah. Very exciting.
Yes. So I knew we couldn't go far without getting our tight endage talk in here. Oh, but by the way, on a totally unrelated subject, I know you watched our top Patriots tight endage of all time.
Yes, I did.
And Russ dedicated the show to you. Isn't that sweet?
I know, it was amazing. And if anybody's listening who hasn't sort of seeked that out, but I'm sure you would have done, Patriots 4th and 2, Steve and Russ did a tight end, greatest tight ends of all time for the Patriots, top 5. It was a great show. And yeah, it was dedicated to myself, which was amazing. So thank you for Russ if you're listening. But yeah, please do go and check it out. It's all the places that you can download your podcast, folks. So make sure you go and check that out from Patriots 4th and 2.
Well, it was funny because as soon as we went live, Russ said, well, hopefully Claire's watching. I said, you said tight ends? I said, her radar went up in, England, and I guarantee you we'll get a comment, and it wasn't like 2 seconds later.
Well, I had to listen. It was dedicated to myself. It was like, how can I not, really?
Russ is a sweet guy when he puts his mind to it.
Yes. His heart is definitely in the right place. That's him.
So
yeah, make sure you go and check that out, folks. Patriots 4th and 2.
But yeah, definitely check that one out because we talked about the top tight ends of all time, and I'm sure there was a couple of guys that we mentioned that you probably never heard of. So
yeah, it was a little bit before my time, but I was very happy to see, and I'm not going to spoil it for folks, but I was very happy to see Russ's top in the end, that we brought him around. I thought it was very good. So yeah, but I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't heard. So yeah, go and check it out, folks. Most places that you download your podcast.
Some of those guys were playing before you were born, so
yes.
But anyway, back to our tight ends. I think the tight ends this season will get utilized more than they were a year ago. I think they're going to throw the ball a lot more. I know that everyone considers them a power running team, and I think that they're going to continue to run the ball a lot. But I think it's going to start tilting more toward the passing game. I think Mac Jones is primed for a nice big jump in year 2. And I think, we talked about the wide receivers, the running backs. I think the tight ends are going to be a big, big part of that. We saw glimpses of what he can do with Hunter Henry. And I think, with Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry out there, I think the needle is moving up for those guys.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Definitely look out for the improved tight endage for season 2.
Improved tight endage. That's
we should do a new T-shirt. Improved tight endage for 2022.
There you go. Offensive linemen. Again, I mean, they have a ton of offensive linemen.
Do they? Really?
They do, really. I think that, they'll probably keep 9. And, that leaves 7 guys who will either be on PUP, IR, or cut. And
well, there is 11 on the roster at the moment. 11 official on the roster, but that doesn't include any of the draft picks. So yeah, it's quite a lot at the moment, I suppose.
I think your top 5 are written in stone. I think it's Trent Brown at left tackle, Cole Strange, the rookie, left guard, David Andrews at center, Michael Onwenu at right guard, and Isaiah Wynn at right tackle. Now, Justin Herron, I think, is absolutely going to make the team as your swing tackle, and that leaves some competition there.
Yeah.
Is there anybody? Well, I put in the starting lineup. Do you think that any of those guys won't be on the team?
I don't think that Cole Strange won't be on the team. I do think he's a starter. The thing is, if they have someone to swap him in and out because they're concerned of him being a rookie, that was the only thing that kind of got me is, can he be a solid starter for the whole season? Because don't forget, they pulled out Drew Desjardins from the CFL. I know he's down as a guard, but I mean, I haven't read if there's any flexibility in regards to that. So
I think he's a guard. And, he was a first-round draft pick. I think it was 4th overall in Canada.
I think it was 5th, but yeah.
And he was an all-star in Canada. I think he's kind of forgotten.
I haven't forgotten him. He's been on my list all the time. So he's definitely someone that I'm looking forward to and hoping that we see.
Yeah, completely. That's why you and I get along so well. But yeah,
and we like Henry Anderson as well.
I really think that he's going to make the team. I mean, we haven't seen him with the pads on, but I think this kid can play. But Justin Herron, I think, is going to make the team, and I think they'll keep another tackle. I think another 2 tackles actually. Yadni Kajus, Yasir Durant, and Kajus could also maybe plug and play at interior if you needed them to. But again, we'll see. I mean, because I was looking at it in terms of with the injury history that they have at tackle, how many are they going to hold on to? And they might hold on for quite a few, to quite a few. But it's funny because again, there's talk in the media circles, and I tend to agree with it. There's a chance. I'm not saying it's going to happen. That they could trade Wynn.
It's all about the money, isn't it?
Huh?
It's all about the money with him. It's such a cap space maker if they trade him. It's less about Wynn and more about just that physical amount of money now.
Right, because he's in the final year of his contract. He's getting paid $10 million. If they trade him, that opens up all that cap space that they really need. They still need to sign some of their draft picks.
Yeah.
They need money to operate during the season. And, I know they've already lost Ted Karras and, Shaq Mason on the offensive line this year. But I think, replacing Karras with Strong isn't a bad thing. And with Shaq Mason, with the Onwenu, I think it's a step back, but not a huge step back. So could they trade Wynn? I mean, I wrote about it a while ago, and I think there's that, I don't know. I mean, you don't want to lose a starting caliber tackle.
Mm-hmm.
But if they feel that strongly about Justin Herron, and you said, you don't get that vibe from Justin Herron, which is legitimate. It's a legitimate concern. But if they feel like that step down from, Wynn to Herron, especially with Wynn's injury history and the amount of money that they saved, they'll probably balance that out. And
don't forget there's Will Sherman and Andrew Stuber. I know they're not necessarily starting caliber, but
they drafted Stuber.
Mm-hmm.
See, what I put was, I think Chasen Hines and Andrew Stuber will start on PUP.
Oh, okay.
In my roster projection, because they neither one of them took part in minicamp. So they're kind of starting if they're ready to go for training camp, which is a big question at this point.
Because wasn't Will Sherman drafted last year?
Yeah, he was he a 6th or a 7th rounder?
Oh, right, yeah.
And then James Ferentz has been around forever.
Mm.
They signed Darrell Williams. He was the center, for the Chiefs.
Yes, that's the name that I've been sitting here knowing. I knew there was another name coming to me and it wouldn't come to me.
Yeah. And then
someone else.
And then the guy with the coolest name on the offensive line, Arlington Hambright.
Oh, he sounds like a baddie from a dodgy Bond movie or something.
Yeah. A dodgy Bond movie. And Cody Russi, who's also interior offensive lineman. He was getting a lot of play during mini camp because David Andrews, was recovering from stuff.
I don't even have him on my list. That's a name that's passed me by.
Well, there you go.
Wow.
Now you can.
There's even more offensive linemen. Oh, I love it. I love me some offensive linemen.
Murph loves his offensive linemen. But really quick, let's do some special teams people.
Yes, let's.
I mentioned Matthew Slater. Excuse me, Cody Davis, Justin Bethel.
Cody Davis, yeah.
Those guys really aren't positional guys. I mean, they can play it in a pinch, but I have them, making the roster as special teams players.
Yeah, that's fair.
Jake Bailey is healthy. Our buddy Mike, again, I'm quoting Mike, but Mike was saying on our show last week that, he was putting punts in orbit again. Now that his leg is healthy again, Joe Cardona is the long snapper. And as long as you're not hearing his name called in a game, he's doing just fine.
Yeah, exactly.
The only time you hear a long snapper's name in a game was if he makes a mistake.
Yes.
And there's a bad snap. So Cardona has two things going for him. He's extremely steady, and he played at Navy. So
go Navy.
That's I'll tend to disagree with you right there. But
talking Navy and Army, what about the Army Navy game 2023 at Gillette Stadium?
I know it. I'm excited to see that coming to Gillette. That's always an event. I love watching it every year because of the tradition. And, I think when the cadets march in for each school at the beginning, I think that's just awesome. And
we should make it a One Patriots Place outing. The three of us should go.
Yes, I would love to go for that, But
slightly more difficult for me, so we might have to start a GoFundMe to get Claire to the Army Navy game. But we'll deal with that later. We've got a bit of time.
But I think it would be a great event to take in, and of course I'll be rooting for the Army. But
yeah, I'm not saying anything. I'm not getting in the middle of that because I know that Murph would say go Navy. So Chris has asked the 2022 kick punt returners will be. Oh, sorry, kick punt returners will be. Oh, yeah. This is actually quite interesting because there's been a lot of talk about the returners. Marcus Jones, Jack Jones, that kind of thing.
Yes, and Marcus hasn't been able to practice yet. But, he's very, very good at that. Jack Jones got some play at that. Don't close the door on Pierre Strong or Tyquan Thornton doing that because of his speed.
Well, I was going to say that, but I didn't kind of want to sound a bit of a dumbass, really, saying about. But yeah, even though he might be sort of one of the top wide receivers, if he's got the serious speed, people aren't going to be able to touch him. So it's going to be, quite interesting to see.
Right. And, being a rookie, he might not get a lot of play, with the top wide receivers in his rookie season. So if he can produce in the kicking game, that's another way of making sure you're on the active game day roster and then, chance to shine. Mm-hmm. We all know that, he can, he can burn in terms of speed. So, get the ball in his hands, see what he can do. I think Pierre Strong has an opportunity to do that as well this year. So I think training camp will answer a lot of those questions.
Yeah. Availability might be one of the best abilities, but versatility ain't half bad either.
No. Bill loves his versatile players. Mm-hmm. One other player I wanted to mention in regards to special teams is Brandon Schooler, the guy they picked up. Very, very speedy, athletic guy. I think he would fit in quite well with that. I have him on my roster as well as one of the special teams guys.
See, I'm a little bit behind because I haven't looked at my roster properly yet. I've just still got my positional one from the Patriots. So yeah, I haven't quite narrowed it down yet. Because don't forget, I have to leave a big gap for tight ends for me. So
I guess Buddy sent this in. Are we just waiting for someone to get an injury, or will this be too soon? I don't think it's ever too soon to plan for that because they invariably happen. I think that will factor into, who makes the cut and who doesn't.
That will be key. Yeah. And would you believe it? We've gone over. Even without Murph, we've managed to smash an hour all by our little selves. Isn't that great? I'm very surprised.
Lee asked the question. Let me.
And say we've got one more question. Do you want to get to the one more question before we close it up?
He said Thornton is fast, but are you concerned he won't be able to get off the line because he's light? Not at all. No. If you watch the tape on him, he has that quick step off where he's able to separate, even against press man. I think, he might have to, up his game a little bit in the pros, but I think that he's shown he can do that. So you will have to see once the, training camp starts and oops, I clicked it twice. Put it right back.
So
but
nice.
Anyway.
We did it twice.
Yeah. But I miss our buddy Murph, but it was nice to get to talk to you one-on-one. I feel like I'm on the Clare perspective now.
We actually got to talk. Can you believe it? We actually both got more than 3 sentences in each show. No, Murph, we love you, obviously, and we miss you, and we can't wait for you to come back. And I think that's going to have to be a wrap, folks. As I said, me and Steve have broken hour. I wasn't quite sure we would manage it, but we did. So it's been fun. We hope that you have enjoyed the show as well. And yes, we do look forward to Murph returning next week. So this has been One Patriots Place Live, brought to you by e2gsports.com. We have been your hosts, Steve Balistreri and Claire Cooper. So tune in next time and go Pats.
Go Pats.